let's start with a story here. Tell us how you guys met, and then maybe tell us about what you're going to talk about today.
Well, first, we'd like to welcome either the Siri pronunciation of Angelo Pirali or Angelo Pirali.
It's Pirali, yeah.
Yeah. How did we meet?
Yeah.
Well, he swiped left, I think.
Oh God.
It was an accident. It was an accident.
The phone was falling out of my hand. Accidental swipe. Yeah.
So going on 9 years ago, I started working at Air St. Grosse, and Angelo was there. And they said, stay away from that guy. You don't really want to talk to him. But then I did. Found out that we were both vets.
Yeah.
Not the animal kind, even though Lola would think otherwise today.
Yeah.
And just kind of hit it off as people who appreciated the profession beyond what it offers us,
The idealized version.
the idealized version of it, yeah.
Okay.
And just kind of hit it off. And so what we're going to be talking about today is we've invited Angelo on the episode so that we can kind of talk about a road trip that he and I just recently took, which was, we'll get into, what it evolved into, like name-wise, but it was sort of twofold. He may not know one of those folds, but one was just to really kind of like drive around, see each other since I moved, but to drive around and look at Midwestern architecture, more of like the master works that are here, some of the things that we learned about in architecture school. But another one is that somebody is feeling a little disillusioned, and I wanted to kind of get him out and show him that the profession that he is well suited for, there is joy out there that he could.
It's painting a bleak picture of me.
I wasn't sure. I wasn't sure though. He could have been talking about himself there, Angelo. I wasn't quite sure who the disillusioned one was going to be.
Maybe it's mutual.
I think that was, to be quite honest with you, I think the trip was a little bit of a chicken noodle soup for the soul for both of us, to be quite honest with you. It was just one of these things that we'd been talking about, kicking around about, him coming out and visiting, kind of showing a little bit about Detroit itself, but then also getting out and going for a little drive. And funny enough, we learned that we can be in the same place for longer than maybe 8 hours and not kill each other, which was actually surprising and fun. But
it was
also
a worry. It was a worry. I was concerned.
I was a concern before.
Well, I mean,
this might not end well.
It could have been. It's just like, oh man, I mean, this is going to be like, we go camping and all that other stuff, but there's other people, there's other victims. I mean, people around that, we could,
right.
But
you can retreat. But if you're both locked in the same car and you've got a road trip planned, you've got destinations and stops and all this stuff you've got to do together, like you gotta make it work.
I know, and honestly, Evan, I know that you sing the praises of Toyota. This Toyota, that. Angelo's got a Toyota, and let's.
You wanted to check out the magic. Is that what I'm hearing?
He felt the magic. He felt the magic.
Oh my Lord, that Toyota Matrix is uncomfortable.
Oh no, poor baby.
Once again, like a Frank Lloyd Wright house, it fit me perfect.
Yeah, I mean it was. Is that Cherokee red?
Yeah, sure, why not?
Or we'll go with sun faded, Baltimore tinged red.
It's multiple reds if you're being accurate.
Yeah, exactly.
Nice.
Like, is this the original front quarter panel? Maybe, maybe not.
All right. So, Angelo, I want you to lay out what the itinerary was, or what the idea was, like where this all started, because everybody gets to hear Cormac talk enough on this podcast.
We're going to get the Evan Troxel interview.
Yeah. I'm going to moderate this panel right now.
So let me start off by saying I've been to the Midwest, but usually just passing through. So I've never spent significant time there. I've, flown through Detroit, been in Ohio a few times, been to Chicago for like a weekend. but never really spent any time there. So I was interested in seeing it, getting a feel for it. When I go on vacations, I like to spend a few days in a place to just see at least one weather change.
Yeah.
And so with Cormac moving out there, we were always like, hey, let's get together. Let's kind of spend some time there. So this was, in full disclosure, I'm on sabbatical from work. So it was a perfect opportunity for me to just kind of spend some time with a good friend, but also see some things that I'd always wanted to see. Never seen Farnsworth House, never seen any of these places. And so we started laying out the trip, and we were initially really ambitious, right? Like, what's the name of that national park right south of Canada?
Like what we were just recently talking about on like, we got to hit all these like national parks, and you want to get the stamps of all these national parks and stuff.
Right.
Angelo's very similar. And he was just like, we got to go to Isle Royale.
Mm.
And it is the most unseen national park in all of the national park systems, because it's an island in the middle of Lake Superior.
Mm-hmm.
And you've got to take
boat or plane.
Exactly. And so we were like, we'll do that. And then
this was on the list. This was on the list.
And this is this big, massive kind of like, here I am talking about, we got to see all of the Sullivan Banks. No, they're not next to each other.
Right. Isn't that on Sullivan Bank Row? That's where all of them are, right?
Exactly. It's just like, they're just right down the street from each other. No, they're all over the place. Wisconsin, Minnesota, Ohio. Isn't it Ohio? I mean,
there's one in Ohio.
Yeah, Iowa, all of these other places.
At what point did you just realize that there were delusions of grandeur with the planning of this?
Almost
trip?
Immediately.
Okay,
but you have to entertain them.
Yeah, for sure.
Because we had a Google Maps kind of session where we were just like throwing stuff in there. Oh, if we're going to be here, we're not too far from, not too far from. So what's interesting is, again, this kind of harkens back to like what you and I were talking about, is that the further and further you get away from the East Coast, the bigger and bigger the states get. And so when you say they're not too far away from each other in the Mid-Atlantic or East Coast, that means that they're like, I can get from DC to New York City in 4 hours. Or in the Midwest, it's like, once you start getting further into like the bigger states, it means that 4 hours, it's like, I'm still in the same state.
You might hit a rest stop in 4 hours if you're lucky. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. So when we were like, the delusions of grandeur of like, we could do this and this, it's just like, wait, how many miles is this? And then we were like, can we do this? Maybe we don't want to do it.
So we also, in planning it, once we got past that point of like, okay, there's too much here, we really needed to scale back and say, okay, we want to have some time in between to go on detours to check out something here and there. And so we tried not to put every day just chock full of stuff. And so I'll kind of lay out, I'll try to lay out just outline style, kind of what it ended up being. So day one, I was coming into Detroit again, hadn't spent any time in there. I wanted to kind of get my first impressions of this place that I'd heard so much about from various people, both architects and non-architects. Just wanted to see kind of how, white flight had impacted a place. And so just first impressions of Detroit, that was day one for me, a little bit initially by myself, and then with great tour guide and we can get into first impressions, and particularly the impressions of Detroit, Counterpoint, Grosse Pointe. And then so that first day we decided to stay around that area, and so Cormac had been to a couple of places that he wanted to see again: Smith House, Cranbrook. What was the second? Frank Lloyd Wright House?
Affleck House.
Affleck House. And then we were going to shoot into Detroit and do the tour of Detroit proper. While in Detroit, I needed to get to Coney's because I needed a hot dog if I'm in Detroit. And so that was on our list.
He asked around. It's like, he'd asked me, it was just like, what is like the food of Detroit? There's the Detroit style pizza and all this other stuff. And then he asked a couple of other friends, and Coney kept coming up, and then Lafayette Coney is like one of the originals in downtown Detroit. Had to do that,
Got it.
just had to.
And it was kind of important to me, right? Because
Well, you got to eat.
You got to eat, but you got to experience architecture both as like, all right, I'm going to a Sullivan Bank or I'm going to a front, but I also need to go to a place that's just a place like that people go to.
Yeah, right.
And I think, that's important. It's a part of architecture, and it's a place where you make memories. So,
makes sense.
So after day one, we decided we're just I'm leaving out a lot, right?
Well, but I mean, okay, so here's the question, Mr. Moderator fella.
Yeah.
Do you want us to go in depth on the list as we talk about it, or kind of go through like, the big picture of what we did and then kind of come back to it?
Yeah. Well, it's proving to be difficult for you guys to just provide the outline because you want to tell all the little details. So I think we're going to have to go chronologically here so that we get the whole story. But if you were to sum up what this trip is in one sentence, give everybody an idea of what they're going to hear on this episode.
Okay, so we came up with a title. I think it was day 2. And it was as we were visiting the kind of like classical architecture, we had used, another bit of like full disclosure, Angelo and I worked on that Hopkins project that you've heard me talk about often. We were partners on that, and we worked on that. And one of the things that we did there, and one of the things that he pulled up when we were working on some of the details, was Renzo's Chicago Institute of Art edition. And as like, some of the things that we were looking at on what we wanted to do with some of the window details and stuff. And so, he was kind of excited about wanting me to go see that, because I hadn't actually seen that, and he has, and he remembers it from back when it had opened, when it was new and fresh and all of that other stuff. And what was interesting is as we're rounding the corner, I see his face before I see the building kind of like drop a little of like, oh man, and he knows, because he knows me and you know me, that I'm going to start to like say, okay, it's rusting, it's staining, and that's of course what I've started to do. And so there was kind of like a title that we had started to look at, just things that, because of stuff, the way we were talking about things and the way that it was called the idea and execution. It was this kind of like big, broad idea of, it's just like, when we're looking at all of these buildings, the classical architectural masterpieces and the new ones and all of this other stuff, it's like, how is that idea? What is the big idea? And how did it get pulled through to execution? Then, and you're going to have to remind me why we started saying blossom of the soul.
Oh man, my memory is poor. I remember us saying this, and all right, maybe it'll come out as we start to go.
Yes, because I wrote it down as kind of like a subtitle to idea and execution, and it was the blossom of the soul. And I don't know if it was like in one of the restaurants we were at or something like that, but it was something that was just like, in a way you can start talking about that, because like we're all very passionate about architecture. I mean, you and I have been talking about architecture in the past 12 years. Angelo would be, perfect fit to this conversation, because that's what we do when we get together, the same thing. And so we really do believe in like what architecture can do for us. And so, this blossom of the soul is something that sounds cheesy, but could be something that like really kind of fits this broader image of like why we were on this kind of trek, not just looking at the architecture, but as Angelo was saying, experiencing it, seeing how it fits and makes the place. We were talking about making of places and spaces and what's the difference between the two. I mean, we were talking very high design to low design, how it all fits together and how it mixes and matches and mushes all together to become what it is to a space. And
it's important for what the next person, the second person to come along does to making place, right? That person comes in and they do a great building, and then someone else comes along,
responds to it.
Yeah, and that in of itself is super important for whether this is successful for a place or not. And you can kind of see that in some of these buildings, a lot of these buildings and a lot of these places that we went to. It was very interesting.
Yeah. I mean, because there's a lot of times where we make spaces and we can make really, really good spaces, but do they make really good places? Yeah. You know, do they integrate and become something greater than? And as we were going through and like seeing all of this stuff, that's kind of like where the conversation sort of went. It was like these weird little ongoing debriefs while we were there looking at it, talking about it, and just kind of like spewing all of this stuff.
Yeah, there's kind of a subconscious layer to it, right? Which is, it's like the poetic side of it. Like to really kind of dial in on your, you know, the blossoming of the soul kind of a thing. Like there's this connection. Yeah. It is subconscious at some level. It may have to do with the exact conditions of the day you meet. It might have to do with the people who were there. It may just have to do with the architecture. It may have to do with the quality of the space or the light. And like, it's very personal at that moment, but it's also like, that's what makes architecture, right? It's kind of this poetic nature of it being something bigger than just the assemblage of parts in this particular way. So I'm really interested that you set an intention going into this, right? It wasn't just like, we're going on a road trip, we're going to see some stuff. It was like this idea of approaching it as like this overarching idea to execution. Like you're looking at it through a lens, right? I think that's kind of interesting for an architectural field trip. It seems appropriate. I'm interested to hear how that turned out, because Cormac, you get out the magnifying glass sometimes, like talking about a lens, right? Like you're like this exact detail right here, like the execution, and it's like, so because it's a balance of both, right? It's like, what was the big idea? What are some of the medium-sized ideas? And then how does it actually perform? I think all of that's valid in the critique of architecture, but most importantly, you're actually going to experience this in person on purpose with this intention. And I don't think enough of us do that enough at the time, right? And so like we just got to spend some time in Washington, D.C. and do that exact same thing. And so you got to extend this idea beyond your guys' road trip. So it's like you're in the special bus, Cormac, all on your own of getting to do, you know, like you're walking the talk here. This is it. So I'm jealous of your special bus, Cormac.
So Evan, when you go, do you go with the idea of, you know, because when I go around with architects, we all say, why would they do this? What is this? Look how they brought this together. And we've practiced. We know that sometimes the best laid plans of mice and men, right? You know,
right.
There are things that you draw to come together a certain way. The contractor doesn't bring it together that way, or
when you're like, not cuts. Like that, right?
Yeah,
right.
Yeah. And so when I go to see, particularly when I go to see contemporary stuff, I am less critical than a little bit less critical than Corcus, because I've been there. I know what it takes. And so I'm looking at it like, okay, what was the big idea? And how successful is it? How does it make me feel? You know, was it, you know, did they get 90% of it, 80% of it?
Yeah, I agree with that, because we don't know what was on the table at the time to make it happen. We have no idea who decided what or why or how much it was going to cost, or, you know, like what, there's so many train wrecks waiting to happen in the construction process. So, and you only get to see the final outcome. You don't get to see why all of that stuff unfolded the way that it did. And so I tend to, like you, give them the benefit of the doubt and say, okay, what 80%? Okay, 80-20 rule, right? How do I feel about this? Rather than really digging in too deeply on the details, and just because you'll just disappoint yourself. Like, let's be honest.
And if they nail it, then I'm like,
oh,
okay,
man, over the moon.
You did it.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, look, so, you know, coming out of, you know,
defend yourself.
Well, I will, because so at the last AIA convention in San Francisco, when I walked down to the
federal courthouse,
and I looked at that, and there's some amazing moves, amazing like big ideas about that, and then I kind of took a look at it and did kind of like my typical thing. I was like, oh man, you know, but then I was just like, you know what? I was just like, I get it. Like, I know, because I've been in the room too, where it's just like, yeah, well, we want to change this, or we want to do that, or the design by committee, or a contractor who can't really execute a detail or a design and stuff like that.
I don't think that's uncommon with Morphosis projects either.
Yeah.
Right. It's like you see that these two things don't come together the way that they were envisioned, like because of a variety of reasons. So
exactly. And so I was just like, you know what? I mean, and so we'll talk a little bit about like on this long road trip. I mean, so let me just kind of set a picture for everybody and kind of rewind a little bit. So, Angelo comes into Detroit. We go we drive around Detroit, and then we make our way to Chicago, and we spend a couple of days in Chicago, and then out in the rural area of Illinois to go to places like the Farnsworth House, and then kind of a little bit back into Detroit, and then up into Wisconsin, and then through Wisconsin up to like Milwaukee, and then out to Madison, and then do a little bit of the Frank Lloyd Wright Trail. And so like it was big. I mean, there was a lot of things we did, and we saw a lot of ground. We covered a lot of ground, a lot of mileage, and thankfully it wasn't a Toyota though, because they could at least handle it. And so there was one time where we revisited a building that I had kind of a somewhat adverse reaction to the first time I saw it, because there was a couple of things that weren't working on it the first time I saw it. And kind of jumping ahead a little bit, it was the Milwaukee Museum of Art, Calatrava.
Oh yeah.
And you've heard me talk about this. It's just like the mechanics of the wings when they were opening up, where they were off sync, and so it didn't quite open up the way that it wanted to, where the wings didn't spread exactly the right way, and it was just like half spread, half like
broken wing.
Broken. And then, I was just looking at some of the details and like buffer scars and all of this other stuff. And, you did the same projects as like, as Angelo and I do, where it's just like we get beaten down by like maintenance has got to do this, maintenance has got to do that kind of thing. And so I was a little kind of like ticked off at it. I was just like, these people are spending millions, probably billions on projects where we have to, like, we get the budgets, and we have to do things, this kind of responsibility to the committee, responsibility to maintenance and stuff. And so I was kind of like ticked off. And, just like when you and I were sitting next to each other at that keynote at the very beginning, when I texted you and said, I was wrong. I told Angelo, I was like, well, I was wrong. This is friggin' amazing.
So the revisit, the round two was better.
Yeah, the revisit got to me, and it was this kind of like, either revisiting, or kind of like looking at some really interesting things through a different perspective. That also just sharing it with somebody else who has, I won't say that we have similar opinions, but we have, that we're looking at it as, lenses of architects.
Similar sensibilities, right?
Yes.
Because if I know what you mean. How many times have I been to an amazing place with somebody who just doesn't care about it at all? It's a completely different experience than experiencing it with somebody who is totally into it.
So, but that's interesting though, is because when we get into places like that, like say when three architects walked into a piece of architecture, you've got this like everybody has kind of got this sensibility. They may see it in a slightly different way or something, but we're going to be talking about it similarly. We're going to talk about, like the procession and all of these other things, and how these captured moments and all of these other like weird things that only we picked up on.
Yeah, right.
But like when we're giving presentation and we overdo it on the archispeak, and, we kind of give them the architect's version of the conversation rather than the person who we're building it for, which doesn't care about the same things that we do, doesn't experience it the same way we do. I'm actually somewhat more interested in listening to their story about how they experience it, more so because that's what we really learn. That's when we really like say, oh, this is what people are looking for when we design things.
inside baseball versus, an outsider's point of view. I mean, there's room for all of it. Is the reason I say that. Like that. Yeah. So yeah. I mean, that's normal. That every single field there is, right? I think that happens. But I'm interested. Like we're never going to get through all the projects that you guys saw.
I don't think so. I think maybe we hit the high.
Yeah, I want to definitely hear the highlights, but if you can give a sense of, okay, you mentioned a bunch of different states you drove through. If you have a rough number, like how many projects or places did you actually see?
We average between 7 and 10 per day.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. But then like Oak Park was just like, we did like, we saw a couple
bunch of drive-bys.
We did a few highlights where we went to, unlike what you and I did when we went to Oak Park and we walked up to Unity Temple and they're like, oh, do you want to take the tour? And we were like, we don't have time. Well, we did.
Probably walked up or walked through at least 20 projects, I would say.
Nice.
Per day or per?
No.
Walked up or walked through. We drove.
No, because I'm looking at the list that I have that, Evan, you're going to have to help me on this for the edit. I want to kind of do a Star Wars scroll.
Of all of the projects?
Of all of the projects. I mean, I'm just telling you right now that, it was, and see, so like when we say, like you were saying 20, let's just take Cranbrook, for instance.
So Cranbrook was one.
On Angela's list,
you say Cranbrook is one, but Cranbrook is
Cranbrook
the campus.
Is many.
Yeah, Cranbrook is many. And so, okay, let me back up to Cranbrook though. So one of the interesting things, this is one of the things that was kind of like this key to like how we package this tour is just like a lot of it is like stuff that we learned in school that we may not have actually like gone to when we were learning about it.
Sure,
all these different precedents. Yeah. And so Angelo was telling me, he was like, hey, I see that Cranbrook's nearby. I want to go to Cranbrook. And then as we're there, he's kind of telling me about, and I'm going to tell you my quick version, and then Angelo, you kind of dig into this. It's just like, he's just like, I learned about this in school, and we learned about like this philosophy of like thresholds and stuff at Cranbrook. I'm like, oh, we got to go. And so like, you're there.
Yeah. So first of all, we get there and we're driving around and I'm seeing all of the things that I'd only seen in pictures, right? And how, the end of one building comes up to the chimney of another and how they're just kind of talking to each other. One goes in, the other one goes out, and they just have this little dialogue, but the silhouette of them create a gateway, a threshold, a thing to pass through. And so, archy nerding out on it, like, oh wow, I've seen this picture, I've drawn this, right? I've drawn this from a picture. I've used this when I'm designing silhouettes to kind of do the same thing. And so it was a pretty spectacular moment for me. But then we get out and you start walking through it and you see this notion, to bring it back to this idea and execution, where you're walking up and you're seeing the details, you're seeing again how a space that you think is square, for instance, is actually not. It's just sort of slightly canted to accentuate that idea of gateway and threshold. So you look at it from one side and you are just seeing the silhouette because the rest of the building sort of moves away from you, and so you can't see the sides. And then you come from the other side and it looks like an elongated, like Looney Tunes, right? It looks like the elongated train
forced
tunnel
perspective, right?
Yeah, and that forced perspective, and you don't get that in the book, right? And so there's the idea of gateway, there's the idea of threshold, but then the execution is something richer, or in this case it was richer. In other cases you're like, but in this case there were all these little moments like that where the big idea drilled down into the details, and that I think was the one of the first times we started talking about idea and execution. This notion of hey, this is the idea of gateway, but here's how it's executed here. Here's how it's executed here, and on a few steps. And that's why Cranbrook was just a really rich experience. In just a few steps, you could kind of experience it completely differently from one place to another. The other thing that was interesting, again, going back to that of what the second person does, right? There's Saarinen the elder and Saarinen the younger, both kind of talking to each other through buildings in this place. It was, again, just, I don't know that I have my head wrapped around everything, but, that's just a little bit of a taste of kind of what it was to actually be there after studying this thing for years.
So I don't know how this is going to come across, but I'm going to share my screen real quick, and I want to show this kind of notion that we were talking about, and it's just this one. So this is this. It's a rectangular building, and it's got a tunnel cut through it, and it's kind of punctuated by a sculpture, and then kind of like the green that of the trees and stuff beyond. So you're drawn into it, right? And you would want to walk through it, kind of like very similarly to like that forced perspective that we were talking about at the Udvar Hazy Air and Space, right?
Right, right.
Where you see like the goal of where you want to go, and you just kind of like want to walk to it. So we're walking up to it, and we're walking through this. And interestingly enough, when you get into the space, we realize when we're standing on this side, we realize, oh, this is really kind of cool. And you see this like beautiful brickwork, and it creates the vaulted ceiling and all that other stuff. And then we walk through, and then it, like, I've been through this tunnel countless times, and it only took the lens of another architect who just kind of picked up and said, they're not the same size. Like,
it's like, what just happened? So Angelo noticed something that you've never noticed, and you've been there a bunch of times. Right.
And so I like counted off steps across here, and then I walked over here and I counted off steps to walk to the other side. And I'm like, it's like 2 feet, 3 feet wider on one end than it is the other. And again, it's not, it's just like, you're creating this like forced perspective tunnel view of, I want you to focus in on that sculpture at the end of the tunnel. And it was just like, who does this? And then we were sitting there and just kind of completely dumbfounded by, hey, we're looking at the brick patterns, and it's just like, I don't see cut brick, or I don't see like,
how did they do it? Yeah.
How we're like, why do architects look up? We're looking up like, wait, how does that brick come together?
Exactly. We need to figure this out.
The matrix math coming down in front of your eyes. Yeah. Interesting. I mean, and the crazy thing to me about this is like the expense that it actually takes to do something like that. I mean, like you said, Cormac, it wasn't even perceptible to you out of countless visits.
Right.
And yet, subconsciously, like Angelo picked up on it, right? There's something's going on here, like what just happened kind of a thing. And it's so expensive to do moves like this, especially that no one's going to really notice. Like for the most part, nobody notices this, right? It is really a subconscious thing. And I mean, that's kind of a shame, right? Thinking about practicing architecture today and the materials that we use and the budgets and the time frames and who's even willing to build what when it comes to these, especially on public projects, right? It's just like, we get this kind of stuff that like this would never even be considered in a VE conversation. Of course we're getting rid of that, right? It doesn't have 90-degree angles.
Exactly, yeah.
Right, and so it's I mean, that's one of the cool things about visiting a master work, right? Is like you're picking up on the stuff, but that they actually did it is just incredible.
And so as Angelo was talking about it, so when you went through that tunnel and you went past that sculpture, there you had this choice to go down the stairs. And when you went down the stairs, what you don't see in that perspective that he created with that tunnel was once you get down to the bottom of the steps and you turn left, you're staring right at this. It's this kind of like series, this layering effect of like these thresholds and these kind of moments of, I got you focused here. Once you get there, you're like, oh, you know
where to go next.
It's that idea of taking you on axis, taking you off of axis. So when you get to that statue, you have a choice. You can look down, and that alley of trees kind of blocks your view of what's on the screen right now. And so you have to come off of axis, right? You have to get off of your path of travel, go down the stairs, turn around, and then you reorient yourself. And then all of a sudden, I'm oriented in a completely different direction.
Yeah.
That again, and there's another gateway, there's another threshold, there's another way of passing through something. And in order to get to it, can you walk straight to it? Are you on access? No, you have to go to the sides, go back around, go up the stairs, come back to be back on center.
It was almost like creating a fun house. Like, you had to kind of go through, it's like, oh, I go through this threshold, option A, out the front gate, option B.
Choose your own adventure.
You go,
right.
Oh, yes. And it was so amazing to kind of like see and for me, like Angelo was talking about, I learned about this and I learned about this concept of gateways and thresholds and things like that. And so as we're walking through it, I'm just like, now I'm looking at it as a completely different way than I did the first time, second time, third time I went there. I'm looking at it as a collection of buildings. Now I'm looking at it as a collection of thresholds and movements through a space that are connected in a completely different way. That walking through with my wife, the non-architect, I'm seeing just good spaces and good places. Now I'm seeing this larger composite that that's why architects should like travel with architects.
I'm so happy that you found your spirit animal here, Cormac.
I don't know how you should take that, Angelo.
Yeah.
As long as I'm a majestic spirit animal, I'm cool.
Right.
He's a badger.
He's a honey badger. Yeah. All right. That sounds incredible. That's definitely one I need to put on my short list of places to experience.
And it's funny, Angelo. So like I've on countless occasions while driving through Cranbrook, I've sent pictures of the gates and all of that other stuff to Evan. It's like, dude, you got to check this out. And I keep thinking, it was like, I want to walk through this with other architects to show them what I'm seeing. And then, let's talk about another thing. Somebody on this conversation has this penchant to try every door. To whether you're supposed to really be there or not, is going to try every door.
Ask for forgiveness later, right?
There was a bit of trespassing that had been done on this trip.
I know what you're talking about. Why would you try every door?
What was great though is, I had no real intention of going into the library at that view that I showed you. I had no real intention of going into the library. And when you go into the library, and I'll pull this up in a second here. Here he is. He's like,
you open the door and there's a person right there.
And
right behind the door.
Right. You walk in and, of course this is beautiful. And
that's incredible.
The thing that's amazing about it is the pattern on this door. Once you open that door, you're in a vestibule. And then right behind that is the glass doors that then lead you into the reading room of the library. And that pattern is replicated in the doors, the glass doors, the wooden glass doors. And then you see this movement here, and you look straight up to the ceiling and you see that pattern up in the soffit of the breezeway. And you see that pattern kind of like replicate on the way that they carved out.
It's all the same language.
I mean, it's all the same language. And it was just this incredible thing. And so then, and I'll try to quickly jump through, there's the exterior of it. But then you go into this space and it's just like these so very kind of like clean and beautiful and just like simple. And and then those lights, I was just like enamored by the lights. I'm like, oh my God, these lights are, insane. And it's just like, I'd love to have one of these in my house.
My experience has been, maybe 60% of the time you walk into a place and they look at you like, what are you doing here? And you say, it used to be, hey, I'm a student or I'm an architect and I'm enamored with this building. They'll say one of two things. You can't be here. Oh, are you now? Come on in. And so, why not shoot your shot?
Yeah, exactly.
And they were gracious. They were really gracious. They were like, hey, come on in, take a look. They just let us walk around in that library. And so,
oh yeah, they were like, they would have let us stay there and talk to them and all this
sleep
other
on
stuff.
The floor.
They're like, oh, you should go and check out the basement. All of these other things. They were great. What an amazing, because it's an art school, what an amazing collection of books. I mean, I could have just sat there and just read the books because they've got like everything from stuff that's, dear to us, like a Bauhaus and all of that other stuff, to like all these amazing artists and everything else. Yeah, it was just
finding
incredible.
somebody at a place who knows something about it is just like the key to unlocking something incredible.
Oh, yeah.
And to me, like those have been my most successful projects, is when there's somebody on the owner's side, whether they're like the actual user of the space or they're a part of the administration or whatever, and there's some piece of the story of the project that they latch onto and tell people who come to the project.
Yeah.
That's the person you want to find, because when they say, you're interested in architecture, you need to know about this.
Yeah.
That's when it's like, that's when it opens up.
And your point about finding that person on the client team is absolutely spot on too. If you find that person that's passionate about something that can embed that passion into a project, it's hard to then kick it out, right? We talked about what gets VD
ownership.
It's like, no, this is the heart of the project. This is the thing that's making the project sing. This is what's blossoming your spirit.
Yeah.
Or your soul. So I think it's important to find that person when you're visiting, but when you're practicing, it's also important to find that person in every project. Sometimes you have to be that person, but if that person is on the client team, it makes it hard for them to say, chuck that out. No one will notice this.
Absolutely.
And so one of the things that we're always talking about, we're always talking about Era Saarinen. And we know that there's the father and son team of the Saarinens. And I don't really know how many people know or appreciate the skill or just the whimsy that Daddy Saarinen brought to a lot of his projects.
Papa Saarinen.
Yeah, Papa Saarinen. Because this is similar to that archway where there was that sculpture at the end. You're on axis with this almost sculpture, this lantern at the corner of this building. And again, you're starting to get these like peekaboos into these spaces. And then the thing about it is that when you pass through this archway and get beyond it, again, it's one of these opening up to like this kind of like just wonders of all of these other spaces that are around there that you had no idea when you're standing here looking at that, that archway, that you had no idea what was beyond that archway. And it was such this beautiful staging that this guy did, which was just like,
check out that composition. You have that archway, and then within that archway you have that, doorway that's, well, first of all, it's centered, right? So the edge of the building is centered on the archway where we're standing, and we managed to place ourselves directly in this pathway. And then you have, how I wonder, how much did they think about how much was happenstance? How much did they did they draw this? So I would draw this view if I were doing this today and be like, okay, this needs to be composed. But then look how the landscape sort of just creeps in from the right and helps tonally balance what's in that archway. It's just so damn good. It made me mad.
They designed those leaves there.
Yeah. Did they? I don't know. Did they just have a really good landscape architect that understood? And I don't know how many times I was standing there just with a look of disgust on my face because they were so good. It's so good, but it's just so well balanced, so well composed. And then the way those leaves sort of peek out, there's more beyond.
Right.
To the left. And so you want to go down there and kind of.
And then there's these like weird little moves or weird little moments that were just amazing. It was these, and I kind of called them leaning posts because I could put my shoulder on there and just stand there. And it was, but you just kind of like have these like little movements, and like this is a window that then when you kind of go back, you've got kind of that implied window, in the arch. And then when you went back, you kind of saw that arch open up to be these like windows onto the courtyard. And it was just these series of moments that you just kind of, and then once you get past it, boom, you like open up and you start to see all of these other things that kind of like create this like massive tapestry of like other things. And then you start to see other thresholds opening up, and then you're like, oh, I got to go there. And it's just like, you just kept wanting to see more and see more. And he didn't disappoint, because there's all these moves and all these moments where then, you same as like on the other side. So this is that building that is, and like that element right there, that kind of fountain is the same element as the fountain and the lantern on the other side. But on this side, it's a little bit different because it's now open, and then you've just got these alignments and everything else. And it was just like,
Also say here, we talked a bit about photography here, right? Because these shots are awfully well balanced in terms of light, right? So you move through these thresholds, and some of them are a lot darker than these photos are kind of.
Right.
And so, the rhythm of light to dark is also present as you're moving. Mm-hmm. And so that threshold, I'm making fun of Frank Lloyd Wright's buildings being small, but there that sense of at least tonal compression, and then walking out into a space that's brightly lit because all of a sudden the sun's back on you. That rhythm, that light is there as well. And so again, that's part of that threshold. And again, part of something that you may or may not see in pictures depending on the intent of the photographer. And so everyone should just sort of visit because
or the number of photos that you can get into the budget, right? So like you're talking about a progression.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, we've got 8 shots to tell the story of this project because that's what we can afford to do, because that's what we can do in a day, and that's how long we can pay for. But you're talking about here, like the actual experience of all of this and taking the time to go through it. Like this isn't about efficiency and not, the campus isn't even about efficiency. It's not about getting you from one place to another as fast as possible, right? No. And so when you talk about idea to execution to experience, like that to me is kind of the Venn diagram here, like experience it being in the middle of idea and execution. And for a really successful experience, for you to feel that in all of these different ways on all of these different levels while visiting this is really, really amazing.
Yeah, because
and we're never going to get to more projects if you don't get past the first one.
We're never going to get past it. I totally agree with you. Nor do I. Because, these are like the things that, and then so then you've got the son who says, all right, Dad, anything you can do, I can do better. And it does these things that you can sort of see right here is one of his dad's buildings and how he transitions to like his additions and all of this other stuff. And they're just like these moments of the convergence of like the two Saarinen together. And then there's here's how I treat the threshold. Here's how I treat the threshold. And they're just these beautiful moves of composition, of light, of shadow, of sound. So this was a picture that was taken actually not when Angelo and I were there, but when my wife and I were there just a week later, when I had completely forgotten after everything that I had signed up for a Japanese garden tour on the campus. And so like I take her back and we're in there, and then what's not here, but so this is when we came through it, but to go to the Japanese garden tour. But then as we were coming back through it, there was a guy who was sitting there and he was playing the guitar. And what was amazing about it, and I don't have a picture of that, but how that particular space, the acoustics and everything else, just really kind of broadened and enriched that space even more beyond what's like that notion that Angelo was talking about of like the second person. You've got the architect who's got his opinion. Now you've got the musician who's got his opinion. And you got all of these other ones who have this other thought and stuff. And it's just, that was what we were looking for. And that was where the blossoming of the soul part of this all came into, is just like looking at stuff like that.
I was at a project, a Billy Chen, Todd Williams project in La Jolla. It's a neurosciences institute. And at this it's a very small campus. It's near the Salk Institute. There is a performing arts theater. And like Angelo, I walked in the door. I just walked in the door. And there was a violinist and a pianist playing inside the performing arts theater. It's a small theater. But it transforms a building into something else entirely. Yeah. It turns it into an instrument, right? And it was, my wife and I were the only two people there. We're peeking our heads through the door, taking this in, and it was like a transformative experience. It was you don't get to do that very often. You don't get to experience that very often. It's total serendipity happening. You just happen to be at the right place at the right time. And that additional layer where somebody is making use of the building as a tool to do something else is absolutely incredible. Yeah.
It's why I don't agree with Frank Lloyd Wright placing the furniture where it is, because I think the people get in there and they make it go. I know where you're going, and they can mess it up. They can mess it up. But all right.
Well,
but
no, go ahead. You're
no, but them living in the space makes it their own. It makes it alive. I think we provide the opportunity for something to happen, but seeing the thing happen, seeing life happen, that's the magical part. Mm-hmm. And I think that's what's really special about seeing spaces occupied by people using them either in the way they were intended or not. That makes it really, really special. I like to go back to buildings that I've worked on and see what the people are doing.
See what happened. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, architects are control enthusiasts, right? Frank is no exception. Probably at the top of the list.
He is probably number one on that list.
Right.
On that hit parade. But what was interesting is you say that it's like about the control of it, and what was interesting about visiting. Unfortunately, Angelo, you had to bail, but this was while he was there. We kind of scored this private tour of a Frank Lloyd Wright house that he didn't get a chance to go to, but my wife and I did. And even though this is not Frank Lloyd Wright furniture, this is essentially where throughout all of the photographs and pictures that the new owners had on there, this was where Frank Lloyd Wright wanted a couch to be. Interesting about that is the reason why that was there. You sit down right here at the far end, at one end, and you sit there. Now you turn back, or obviously you're facing away from this back view here, and you're looking kind of like at the breadth of the house. If you sit in that one spot through the clear story, through the way that the compression and everything else are, you see the entire house. You see the entire house from the interior spaces, and then you look through the clear story and the windows, and you continue to see the house as it moves to the exterior. And you just see everything about it, and it was
you see the idea.
Yes, and you see that idea, you see that intent that he tried to create in curating. You must sit here. Like if you sit here, you see everything.
This is the sweet spot. Yeah, like this is the sweet spot.
Yeah,
right here.
Yeah. And you're just like, as to repeat what Angelo said numerous times about numerous architects on this trip. Man, I hate that guy.
A little jealous.
Yeah. Well, it wasn't jealousy. It was just hate. Just hating.
Let's be honest. It was. I mean, like, and there's what was interesting about some of these, and again, yes, we could talk forever, and we're probably. I mean, we're literally still on day one of this conversation, and
that's what I'm concerned about.
And there's a lot of other things. So I'm curious from Angelo, your perspective, like of all of the things we saw, and let me just do kind of like a real quick, like of a real quick rundown. In Chicago, we saw the Rookery and the Chicago Art and the Pritzker Pavilion and Apple Store and the Chicago Tribune Building. We went to the Glesner House, strolled down Prairie Avenue, the Roby House, although we didn't get a chance to do the tour, but we were like in and around the Roby House. And if somebody would have probably had a set, we would have been inside, no problem. But I'm just saying, people who like to try, doors usually get in sometimes.
Should have tried the door.
Oh, he did. He did. Okay. He tried every door. He also pulled on the gate, because there's a gate in the back where you go in.
Check it. I was really checking to make sure it was secure. I was looking out for them.
We did like
Quality
all of these
assurance.
Like classical things. We went to the Farnsworth House, Unity Temple, the Frank Lloyd Wright House and Studio. We went to 868-80, then we went to 900-910 Lakeshore, both of the Meese projects, and we went and saw the People's Gas Pavilion. We saw the Poetry Foundation, which I think in a way for a modern building, we were both like just enamored by that. And, the simple moves that just made such I mean, I hate to say it this way, but it was pretty poetic how they like did all of these like, moves on this building that were just so simple, but so elegantly done. And you're just like, yeah, of course this is the Poetry Foundation building, And so we had all of these things, and then we wouldn't like, there was a lot of like Wright stuff. And there was a point where he's just like, yeah, I think I'm write it out.
Well, I wasn't write it out for a couple more days yet.
Yeah. I mean, for that point, and stuff. But I mean, I'm curious in like the first few days, I mean, what was like some of your highlights that you, like really enjoyed?
So Detroit, Chicago highlights.
Yeah.
Feel like that way.
Sure.
Yeah. Say the Poetry Foundation, I think, was a highlight in Chicago. I actually enjoyed. This was a highlight, and maybe because of the conversation we had, was the whole Millennium Park. So being at,
I knew you were because do this to me.
I know, because one, this is when we actually coined the phrase "idea and execution," right?
Yes.
And at that point, we were talking around it, but we hadn't kind of gotten to that phrase yet. It's also where we started talking about, the success of that next person coming in. But really, where we coined it was when we walked into Gary's pavilion, right? And idea, fantastic. But there were some things that we questioned about how it was done. Could it have been done more elegantly? And I think anytime you're talking about Gary, that's going to come up. But in this in particular, this idea of a place where you can go listen to music that is this informal pavilion in the middle of Chicago with these, vertical towers in the background. Beautiful idea, right? The Chicago Museum of Art, this very light, sort of delicate thing sitting in the middle of this park, connected to the old building. Beautiful idea. In Renzo's building, how it was weathering, I was a little taken aback because of the rust, because of the streaking, because of things that that it had time kind of was doing its thing on that building. And in this one, just in the way the things came to the ground, the way those arcs just kind of were held up by these piers, could it have been done a little bit more elegantly? And so this is really when we started talking about, okay, great idea. What do we think about how it was done? And this goes, I think, went beyond nitpicking, but this was a choice.
Yeah.
Right here. This was a choice. And it wasn't, I don't
explain
think...
what you're, so for people who aren't looking at something right now, explain what we're looking at.
So, kind of what Angelo was talking about. And so let me set a little bit more of this. Is like, we were kind of texting back and forth with, one of the principals at the firm, Adam Grosse, one of the names on the door. And we were talking about, it's just like, I had sent him some pictures because we had talked about Cranbrook a lot because he's one of the planner gurus. And so he absolutely loves Cranbrook. And so like I sent him a picture of Angelo and I there, and we had talked about that, and he's just like, oh, it's amazing that you guys are doing this. What is on your itinerary? And so we started to kind of like feed him a little bit of like the itinerary. And he's like, oh, if you're going here, then you got to go to the Pritzker Pavilion by Gary. And, the funny thing is as many times as I've been to Chicago, I've been to the Bean and all of these other things, but there was either events or something else that had the actual pavilion blocked off. And so I never actually went to it. I've seen pictures of it and things like that. And so you see this, and you see this kind of like this big trellis, and you look at it and you're like, and then without keeping this a family friendly show, when we like rounded the corner and we looked at it, and I said, what the is that? Bleepity bleepity bleep bleeps. Because as elegant as this kind of very swoopy bandshell is, and I get the idea of this kind of like very light trellis to kind of open up the view and kind of like have this kind of like almost counterpoint to like all of these very vertical skyscrapers and everything. But the way that he chose to kind of like just terminate it, it almost seemed like a cop-out. It seemed like he like forgot that, oh, and I have to find a way to make these come to ground. And I started looking at this in the lens of things like how Trava, brings his big swooping arches and stuff down to ground, and all of these other different people, how they like meet the ground. And then you look at this and you just like, I know that there's a big concrete sonotube behind that wrapped in stainless steel, but you then now have this structural steel above it, which if you can sort of see is rusting and flaking and falling apart. And it just,
That's not his fault.
It is.
Building maintenance. It's the owner.
The
owner has to take care of the architecture.
Choice.
Come on, you can't.
Idea.
What?
Idea
You're
versus
gonna
execution.
You're gonna powder coat a 100-foot wide piece of steel structure? No, not that. But I think it's interesting. These columns, like, they don't look bad in the photo. These columns don't look bad in the photo. And I'm trying to imagine what these columns would look like in California, and they would be 8 times that size in California because of the jack plate that you would have to have for the seismic for this to work.
This was better view. But I mean, it was just like this. Like, it was a letdown to me that it was just like, like it was, you were like, it was right there. And it was just like, they're like, I've seen so many things that he's done has got this like elegant transition to the ground. And then this one was just like, it literally to me felt like a toupee kind of like flopping in the breeze of some dude riding his bike down the road.
This comes across to me like this is a project that is like a 30,000 foot view project. And then when you get to where it touches the ground, it's like, oh, right. This is one of those things where it's way more idea than execution is what you're saying.
Exactly. Yes. And and again, this is where the evolution came from. This was where.
Now, I have seen this last time I was here, Cormac. This was filled with people. And so I don't recall seeing these piers.
And again, they're not like people aren't paying
they probably
attention.
Disappear with all the people there.
Again, people, you're right. People aren't paying attention to this. They're not looking up and seeing the paint flaking off of it and the steel rusting and all of this other stuff. But
you're too much of a project architect sometimes, right? Like it's keeping you from the experience. And not only that, but like you can't experience if you're not in like the actual use case of the facility too, right? Like, like Angelo is saying, if you're there in a concert, I bet it's like incredible, right? But when it's like this and you're just walking through it and there's that energy isn't there, that it's not alive like it is during a concert, and you're staring at and now you're like staring at the stuff, and it's just getting.
And I'm enjoying pitting you two against each other.
We do it. We've been doing it for 12 years.
So just beyond this, and you can't see it in this photo, but just beyond this, there are these concrete walls where the metal from the stands kind of stop. These concrete walls kind of pick up, and it's like, well, okay, I get you're what you're trying to do here, but was that the right choice?
Yeah.
So because it could have just continued on. Everything else is coming down and sitting on this concrete. And again, perhaps nitpicky. I think as an idea and as it's fantastic. It's just when it's not full of people, to your point. But some things jump out. But
hear me out. There's two different things about this that kind of didn't sit well with me, and it wasn't the place. It wasn't the space. The space, I get what it is intended to be and everything else, but what I'm looking at this very kind of like dramatic band shell and everything else, and then I look at it as two kind of separate projects. The band shell is one thing. The trellis that holds the lighting and the speakers and all of that other stuff. I understand that it's got to be robust and hold up and like high winds and everything
maintained.
Else. But
Chicago does have extreme weather, if I'm not mistaken.
They sort of do. But when put this in the lens of architects who are trying to design for permanence. And you look at other buildings that we had been touring, we toured the Rookery building and we were looking at all of these other things. And you're looking at it in the lens of something that had been there for, 50, 60, 100 years, 150 years. And you look at this and you see oh, I've been here for like 10 years and I'm already starting to rust and corrode and all of these other things. And it's just like, there's almost this sense of design irresponsibility that,
I wonder if it was supposed to be that permanent. I mean, I don't know the answer to that, but
I don't know that, but like,
I think about like this and I think of a World's Fair kind of a thing, right? And it's like, oh, this is going to, like the Eiffel Tower, this is going to go away oh, nope, it's still there. Now we got to deal with it.
So we asked this question a couple times and I don't know that I came up with a good answer. Like, all right, do this. What else would it be? Counterpoint, later on in the day, we went to People's Gas Pavilion, which was made out of wood, which beautiful. We saw it at a perfect time of day, dusk. You look back and you get that iconic view of the city beyond it. And it was beautiful, well executed project. But it's wood, right? It's laminated wood. And I think we had gotten there just shortly after it had been renovated.
That's the Genie Gang project?
Yeah.
Okay.
And so we were seeing it. We could kind of smell the refinishing.
Yeah.
So we were seeing it probably in its best condition, other than probably when it first opened. This is a photo you took, right?
Yeah.
I mean, this is not anything off of again, fantastic, glorious. But is that the right material choice for Chicago? It seems to be holding up well. But again, we're seeing it for the first time.
It might take. They may be more proactive about their maintenance.
They might be. They might be. But this is one of those ones that you look at it and you're like, look at the way that it meets the ground, and those kind of like really well thought out,
elegant,
kind of like transitions to the base, and it was just like looking at that, and then coming to this later to the People's Gas Pavilion. You're just like, well, they could do it here. Why couldn't they do it there? And then so I kind of got hung up on like looking at these transitions. So when we started going to,
maybe she did look at how it met the ground and was like, I can do better.
it very well could be. But it was just this, and yes, scale wise, this is much smaller, much smaller.
Yeah. Not the same thing.
It is not the same thing, and it's,
beautiful.
But I mean,
this was a highlight. I would say you asked the highlights. This was a highlight. I would say, not only seeing it, but when we saw it, right at dusk. This, and we didn't plan this. Again, this was one of those that was like, if we have time, let's go see this. And as we were heading out, we kind of, it's right there. Let's go. And so we kind of peeled off and went and saw this. And so this was really well done.
Nice.
This was a highlight, I would say.
And pavilions are so cool. Pavilions.
Yeah, you can do whatever you want.
Yeah, it was like it was just beautiful. This was where probably one of the hardest times that I had laughed on the trip.
Well, I put you in a hot spot. You can tell the story if you want.
So we pull up. He's driving. We pull up to put the card, like, because it was at Lincoln Park, and it was also
preface just by saying I'm not that short. I think I'm
T-Rex,
normal
his
height.
little T-Rex
normal
arms.
height.
And he's trying to like reach out there, and he just like it was the ticket, like for a normal size person would just like reach out, put the credit card in, get their ticket, and here he is. He's like stretched. He couldn't get to it. Had to open the door to basically get out. And he wasn't that.
It was on lifts. It had to be on lifts.
It wasn't accessible to sign.
We'll go with that.
No, you had to get out of your seat to kind of reach the.
No, you had to get out of your seat.
Everyone would have had to have jumped out of their seat, unless. All right.
But it definitely in town. I mean, as this kind of, it was this interesting, beautiful little folly in the middle of Lincoln Park, and at dusk, Angelo's right, at dusk when you're seeing it with that dusk lighting and everything else, and just the beautiful kind of like honey colored wood, kind of like, and now you've got the silhouette of the trees and the lake and stuff, and then rising above that, beyond that, is the city, and you see like the Hancock building and all of this other stuff, and it was just this beautiful layering. You think back to like what Saarinen did at Cranbrook and you think about like all these different layering effects, and it's another one of these kind of like talking about the threshold and kind of like creating these kind of like these views, these threshold views, or these physical thresholds and things like that, that just kind of kept seeming to like reoccur as we're going through all of these spaces, because they were places and spaces. They were like, you know, they worked on the collective whole. It wasn't just like, oh, I'm a jewel box sitting here all by itself and it's ignoring everything else. All of the successful projects that we visited were part of the fabric.
Yeah. Yeah. Poetry Foundation was like that. There was layers to that, just layers of transparency. You're looking through that perforated metal through a garden into a library. It was just, yeah, you're absolutely right. The more successful ones, I think, placed you within your environment and allowed you to be connected beyond just the spot that it was sitting on.
Yeah. Yeah, I've talked about projects a lot in the context of the building doesn't, the project doesn't stop at the property line.
Right.
It's like, how are you a good neighbor? How do you contribute to the community of things? Like, how are you reacting to, but also proactive of who comes next, kind of a thing, like you were talking about earlier. Like, there's all of these different aspects when it comes to a project that architects have to take into consideration when they're doing design work that a lot of people don't think of. Like, they're used to like, okay, like an infill project. Like, a lot of people just think of every project as an infill project. Like, what's happening from here in instead of from here, this imaginary line we have around our property outward, and how we present ourselves. And are we part of the neighborhood? Are we part of the community? Yeah.
May butcher this, but wasn't it Chicago and Burnham who said you have to consider the projects 2 scales out as well as 2 scale? I can't remember how he said it, but
well, I always think back to the very first. It was pretty positive. It was the very first day of architecture school, and my professors showed Powers of 10. And for those of you who are not familiar with it, it's the Eames movie, Powers of 10. And it's this kind of like macro view, micro view, zooming in, zooming out. And what I learned from that is that you've got to look at the big picture, you've got to look at the small picture, you've got to look at the details. And the Poetry Foundation was really interesting as a counterpoint to, say, Renzo's Art Museum edition, because where there were some big moves, big concepts, and there were some similarities in the screening and all of these other like aspects. It was, okay, you've got these big moves. Now, how do you transition down to, say, the smaller details? And, you know, there was one where at Renzo's building, and let me preface this by, I am an admirer of Renzo and the detailing and the rigor and everything else. This was probably the most disappointing one on the trip for me, because I am so enamored with the New York Times building and the beautiful detail and everything else that he does. And then you go to that one and you're just like, it's not holding up, it's rusting, there's staining, there's this almost material irresponsibility in a way. But you know, and you see like this screen, and then the screen comes down and it stops. But that the water's going to continue to like roll down and hit the ground. And so now there's like this staining and cracking on the concrete and stuff. But then in the Poetry Foundation, they have a similar thing. They've got the screen coming down, and they just did one simple difference between what they did and what Renzo did was they transitioned like, oh, I'm going to put a channel, a little gutter right beneath that, because I know rain is going to be coming down through here and puddling and all of that other stuff. So let me capture it, but capture it in such a beautiful little detail, because, okay, yeah, it's a gutter, but it's also this shadow line that kind of transition you from the building to the public realm. You're moving from the private to the public. It's just this simple, like, shadow line, this dark like line that when we're drawing things and we're drawing like this figure ground or a site plan or something, and we do this big heavy line between like our building and the landscape, whether they intended it to be this way or not, that's what it happened to be. It's like it was this big heavy line that kind of drew all of this stuff. And it was just simple little moves that they did that was just like really amazing. I was completely baffled, or not baffled, awe, just like in awe. This is their gate to close it off for the day. Is they have basically the panels in the sidewalk lift up.
It's like a drawbridge.
Like a drawbridge. Yep. And lift up and close it off. And no, you can't squeeze around it.
You know what this is? This is those things that lift up on the aircraft carrier deck that the aircraft uses its thrusters against to get off the deck.
But I mean, it was just like, cool. Like, well done. Like I looked at it and I'm just like, that's amazing. Like other people would be like, hey, how do we do a gate here? We need to put a gate here. How do we do a gate here? And some people would put a gate or something like that.
Yeah, for sure.
When this goes down, when
you wouldn't even think twice about it.
Yeah,
you wouldn't even think twice about it. You would put a gate there.
Exactly. And then in here, the sidewalk comes up during at night when we're closed, and then during the day it goes down, and you have this kind of like free passage and everything else, and it's just cool. These simple little moves, and it's just. It's a simple transparency.
But you have to add the asterisk that say, simple little moves that cost a lot.
Why you got to be like that?
Because it's the truth. Believe me, as a designer, I want to spend all the money.
Exactly.
Like that's the job. We got to spend all the money. So, but you have to give up something else to do something like that.
Yeah, so it's like, is...
I tried that door too, by the way.
Yeah, he did. He tried all the doors. All the doors. In this beautiful like little transparency between like the public realm of people going by on a busy street and all this other stuff, and you're in the courtyard, and you almost feel this separation between the serenity of the courtyard and the busy hustle of the street and stuff. I mean, I totally agree with Angelo that it really was, because it's just simple moves. It was really a highlight, because it's one of those things, it's like anybody could do it, just people aren't. And you just kind of like, oh, I wish you were.
So John Ronan was the architect of that.
Yeah.
We left there and made our way towards Farnsworth at that point, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
If we were thinking, if we had planned this a little bit better, we would have stayed the night in Chicago. But we had an early tour at Farnsworth, so we thought it would be better to kind of beat traffic and kind of get out that way. So we kind of went towards Farnsworth, found a place to sleep, and then the next day we actually took a slight detour. Atlas Obscura is an app both of us use, and we found two. Well, all three of us found a windmill and a Viking ship.
Wow!
And we did not get to the Viking ship.
Yeah,
it was just outside of our timetable. But the windmill was. You're gonna go back to that Viking ship, right?
I've got to go back to that Viking ship, of course. I mean, how can you not? Like, there's a Viking ship in the middle of rural Illinois. What?
That's cool.
Why not stop and see it?
You need to know the story of that. Yeah. Very cool.
So was that the one that they sailed to the Chicago's World Fair?
Yes.
World Fair?
They built it. So the Scandinavian countries for the Scandinavian installation at the Chicago World's Fair, they built it for that, and they sailed it across the Atlantic, and it was part of the exhibition, and then it just stayed here. And now, for some reason, somehow, some way, it has landed, both literally and figuratively, in rural Illinois.
Wow.
You're like, what? But okay.
How? Yeah.
So Farnsworth was worth going to. The stories were, the age-old story of the architect and potentially inappropriate relationship with client that ends in disaster. I don't know how many times we heard that story on these tours, but this one was interesting. This was a Mies van der Rohe house, perhaps his most famous house, I would say, other than the Barcelona Pavilion, which again, pavilions are cool. But this one. This was interesting for me because it floods like every 10 years or so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
they're, if they want to preserve it, they were saying they want to preserve the integrity of of its place where it was built. I get that. But man, just move it up the hill a little.
Yeah. Because it was originally designed and budgeted for $42,000 at the end of it, because Edith Farnsworth, basically this was when she started getting into a battle with Mies, is she had stayed there and she basically was supposedly close to being finished. And she was like finding all of these issues with the glass and with the finishes and all of that other stuff. And so she was just like, no, absolutely not. This isn't ready for public or my consumption. And beautiful and elegant and everything else. But the cost of preservation of this pavilion over its lifetime, and it's not that long of a lifetime, is astronomical. I mean, we're talking.
I was going to say it probably costs $42,000 a month.
It's tens of millions of dollars. Almost said billion, but millions of dollars that they've spent on the restoration, preservation, then restoration, more restoration, fixing, flooding, all of this other stuff throughout the course of this, where the building was almost submerged and everything else. And then they were just like, well, how are we going to protect this? And it's just like, well, let's build a platform where we like put it underneath the platform and raise it up when it starts to flood. And because like right outside from the stairs, when you're looking out at this river, and the river basically floods, and you're basically sitting, as you can see in the photographs that we're showing, it's sitting down at the bottom of the hill. So it's sitting in the floodplain. And could it have easily been moved up the hill and completely avoided all of that? Sure. There's a lot of property on here that still kind of maintains it. But this is actually the second site. Didn't they move it already once?
Is it the second site?
I thought I could be wrong. I know. But anyway, it's just one of these things that, like, you know, trust me, it is elegant. It is beautiful. It caused me to ask a question of what makes buildings loved? Because here you have this masterpiece. Here you have something that we as the world have put the moniker of, this is a UNESCO World Heritage Site. This is something that we are going to maintain, and we're going to dump whatever kind of money that we can into this building to save and preserve this building. Why? Why have we chosen this to be the loved one and other buildings not loved the same way? Is it because of Mies? Is it because of the story? Is it what makes it? And it wasn't necessary. This was one of those that kind of caused me to ask that. And then we're looking at, when we were walking around the very last building that we actually went to, so I'll jump ahead to day 5. The very last building that we went to was Frank Lloyd Wright's Taliesn in Wisconsin. And in there, what was interesting about that one is because, yes, they are undergoing a lot of preservation on it. And here we are walking around, and Angelo said earlier, like the environment, the weather, everything kind of makes the experience. So here we are. Every day had been this amazing day except for the very last day. And it's just torrential raining. And we get to Taliesn, and it's just showing all of its flaws. It is leaking inside the building. You kind of accentuate the sagging and all of this other stuff. And it's just still an amazing space. But, you know, you're just like, again, why are people dumping tens of millions, potentially hundreds of millions? Think about falling water and how much money they dumped into that to preserve and protect that and rebuild it and things like that. When then, as we're standing at the Farnsworth and we're walking around and, of course, doing the very typical architect thing of looking at the details and all of that other stuff, we're asking ourselves, we're asking each other, it's just like, how can you achieve this building in today's technology and by today's codes, by today's energy standards and all of this other stuff? Would it have the same kind of like feel? Would it have the same kind of expression as it does now? Or it did back then? What can you do to kind of like make these modern masterpieces like this? How can you do that today? When there was all these other things. It's just there was this big conversation, Evan, that we were having about
this is of a time.
Yeah.
right? Like, and to me, like, so before I went into architecture school, I'd never seen this project.
Yeah.
When I saw it, it changed my mind about architecture. Like, it was just like, it was one of those projects where it's like, you can do what? I had no concept that buildings could be like this.
Yeah.
And so, like, on a visceral level, as an architect who learned that at a young age, I understand completely why this is a protected place.
Yeah.
Right. And it is of a time, and I don't think buildings should be raised and replaced with the new modern version, right? And I don't think you're advocating for that, but you may be advocating for this to become an Atlas Obscura site. If just perpetually under 10 feet of water would be a really cool ruin.
It would
right?
be. That would be pretty cool.
But like, yeah, I mean, that's a really interesting conversation. I think that there are places where you think about that, and there's a lot of places you don't think about that, right? Like, this is one of those that just has so much lore around it because of all of the reasons that you cited. Was it the architect? Was it the relationship? Is it the project? Like, is it the time? Is it the place? It's like there's so many layers to this story, and all of that I think is. So
then go back to the Pritzker Pavilion, and you look at that, and you're just like, I can see that this looks, feels, and can really be temporary. Like, this won't be saved. Some of it might be saved.
Not every architecture needs to be. Yeah.
Right. And that was like that what makes it lovable, like.
Oh, let's skip past a lot of the things we did see. We saw a lot of Frank Lloyd Wright, and a lot of Frank Lloyd Wright, they told that story that I hate, which is when we went to Taliesn, which is he kind of went and saw Falling Water and then went back and apparently did not work on it. And then the owner happened to be doing some business in Milwaukee and called him up and said, hey, I'm on my way and I want to see the
genius.
progress.
The genius arrived for all of a sudden. He
sits there and whips it out. And I remember my first day of architecture school, Brian Kelly told that story as we were all sitting in the auditorium, and he told that story. And he's like, they tell that story when you visit, and they want you to know, to understand the genius of that architect. But what folks didn't know was that he had another studio in his house where he would sit and kind of work and churn through versions of this. So when he drew it was not the first time he was drawing it. And his point was that obviously there's a lot of hard work that people don't see that goes into all of this, right?
And subconscious cranking, like you can't put an apparent value on all of the work that we do, just cranking away in the depths of your mind, and then you spit it out on the page at some point because you have to.
But the point though is the one thing that we're skipping past that Frank Lloyd Wright did was he brought a story and showmanship to architecture.
Right.
That you're talking about all of this embedded lore in this particular building, and I got to think that that's part of it. And then we talked about on the trip, why is Frank Lloyd Wright this world-renowned architect? Does anyone else have a trail? Any other architects have a trail dedicated to them that you kind of
amazing salesman? Yeah, he's a showman.
Yeah, and it's got to be part of it, right?
Right.
And so, but to go back to your point, that these modern masterpieces, do they have that story? Do they have that show that potentially goes with them to make the modern masterpieces, or do they stand on their own in the way did you know all the stories, Evan, when you first saw this? It just was strong enough on its own to just
visually striking.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So I think probably a little bit of both. I think it seeps into the consciousness of the public who don't really, I don't know, maybe they consume architecture the same way we do on a subconscious level. Maybe they don't. But I think all of that plays into it in making these spaces. And I think that's why and we skipped past a lot of the places we went to him. I think that's part of what made him so part of the fabric of society and architecture as we know it, is all of that showmanship.
Right.
Is all of that other things that he put into it that was not just part of the architecture. And shows in his architecture, though. His architecture does have a showiness to it.
Yeah.
What was interesting about almost all of the places that we visited and we toured is they were well-attended tours. People were coming out. There was tons of people on the Farnsworth tour. And we're talking that they had to make a trek to drive out to
They weren't in your photos.
Well,
good job.
For good reason.
If I wanted people in my photos, I would have designed them.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly. But I mean, it's this, like, I don't, so we met at the Farnsworth House. What was amazing is we met a studio from Sao Paulo that here they are as a studio. They travel with the entire studio and they go to different places each year to experience architecture. And so here they are traveling, and it's not just, the principals went and maybe a couple of senior people. It was all of them. And it was interesting to listen to and see their reaction to the place, how each generation of architect was reading it differently. We met a family from England who the dad was there and the mom was there, and then their two grown sons were there, and one of them was an architect, and like we bumped into them a couple of different places and even told them, it's like, hey, if you're still around, there's another tour going on here. And it was kind of amazing to meet these people and share like this experience with them. And that was kind of like the interesting thing, is because we were seeing them from a variety of different lenses of architects, lenses of people who just appreciate good work, and just like people who would not normally be, I don't know, it's just there was the draw, there was this desire to be there and to see these works and pieces and things like that. I don't know if it was, I don't know what other people's mindset was. It was kind of interesting to kind of like see, and you could tell, and Angelo and I were like walking around talking, and it was just like, I was standing on the platform at Farnsworth, and a lot of that firm was like there, and I was just like, so architects, what do you think? Because it was just like, you knew they were architects, and you knew that it was just, and then it just sparked a conversation about like not only like who we are and all that other stuff, but how other people like are viewing this work. I mean, we grow up as going through the American schools for architecture, and we're learning about these like American masterpieces and stuff. But here's somebody that went through school in South America, and they're here visiting these American masterwork and telling us their impressions of these spaces and these places and things like that. And then they're saying it's like, oh, and we spent time in Toronto, or we did this, or we did that. It was just kind of amazing to kind of like see this kind of collective love for all of these spaces that we went to. That was something when we went on just recently, when I took at the AIA convention, and I took a couple of people over to the Pope Leahy house, and we were probably the only 3 architects at this. But here is the day of Frank Lloyd Wright's birthday. There's this whole big celebration going on. There's cake at the place, and there's kids, there's adults, there's teenagers, there's all these different people, and it was packed at this small little house of people who wanted to be at good places, a good space.
Interesting. I'm going to do what we do here, Angelo, which we're going to bring this full circle. All right. So something that Cormac mentioned early on, and we all, I think, have ups and downs in our careers. It sounded like there's a dip going on, right, with this disillusionment with the profession of architecture, probably not architecture itself, but just like the practice of architecture. We all go through that. I'm just wondering what this tour did for you. Like, how do you feel after going on this whirlwind architectural tour? Did it reinvigorate you? Did it re-excite you? Is it just unobtainable to get to this level? Like, how did it affect you as an architect?
Well, it was, I would say there was some reinvigoration. It was less that it was out of reach, and more so that it is attainable, that it's not as far out of reach as we think. I think, I think it was nice to sprinkle in some of these modern pieces and see what's achievable here. I think if it was all old stuff, old in quotation marks, I think it would have been more so that this is unobtainable. That happened then. It's not going to happen now. And that happened with these characters. But to see work being done now that I would hold up to some of these masterpieces, I think, was the invigorating part, the part that made me feel like, yeah, we can do this stuff now. We can do things that generate the same sorts of conversations, same sort of excitement, and really provide spaces that allow life to happen, which is really what I think I'm trying to do, right? Is create a space where people can live and have experiences and create memories, discoveries. If it's a laboratory, I'm trying to provide the opportunity for life to happen in a building. And so I think seeing both of these side by side, and then unfortunately I couldn't make that last trip, but then to know that people, regular everyday people, are still living in these places that you got to visit, I think was also a part of it, and probably a reason why I didn't want to quite see it. I wanted it to be in my mind as something that was a little bit more romantic than what I might have seen if I had been there.
You're editing. You were like editing your experience, like
a little
preemptively.
a little bit. But yeah, it made me feel like it was actually more attainable than less. Right? Because as much as I was like, I hate this guy, it wasn't like it was so far away.
Great.
Right? And as much as
that's a really interesting point. I feel like that too. Like there's amazing work that you can go visit. You can go on these tours and you can feel like you could do it too. I mean, I really do feel like we have all the tools. The magic is finding the right client, right?
Yeah. The right
but
client.
You really can. It is attainable. It is achievable, but it's still really hard. But I think you still feel like the possibility and the opportunities are there.
Yeah.
I mean, so like the very first time I ever went to Glenstone, Angelo was by my side. Another friend of ours was by our side, and looking at that as kind of a modern masterwork, in my opinion. And just seeing that, these are attainable, like this is an attainable goal, creating a place and a space, creating something that has kind of that similar dynamic to, say, maybe not a Cranbrook, but something like that has this like language of, it's not just the little built environment, like the little building itself, but it's how it's integrated into the landscape, how it kind of creates and tells this whole story around all of these other, like all the other assemblage and everything else. I mean, it just like, those prove to me that things like, say, the Farnsworth House and other things we can do those.
Yeah. There's this quote, there's like this lost interview with Steve Jobs. So it's kind of informal, feels a little casual. And one of his epiphanies, I think, in life was just when he was like realizing that the people he really looked up to who were doing incredible things were just like him.
Yeah.
Right. And just, but very few people are motivated to take things to that level. Right. And so being motivated to do that, I mean, that's really where we see these projects coming out of. Right? It's like, how much time and effort does it take? It takes a lot to put the level of attention to detail into these projects, and just to like first to have the understanding, but then to the idea, to the execution, right? Like that is a huge commitment.
Yeah.
And it is a long road, but I mean, that motivation is what makes these things masterworks.
Yeah.
I mean, that's where it really, and just the stars have to align, and there's all kinds of magic in there, right? But that really is, the budgets, the taste, the materials, the contractor, like there's just so many pieces to that puzzle, but it is possible. And I love like kind of getting that out of you guys throughout this process, because first of all, you're doing something that a lot of architects won't do. They just don't have time, in quotes, to go out and do something like this, and to do it and to walk away from it and think like, this is reinvigorating. This reinvigorated the thing that I think I'm here to do, my purpose, the meaningful work that I want to do. So I appreciate you guys taking the time to share it, because not very many people get to do it. And I hope this inspires others to figure out a tour of their own and go into it with an intention of, trying to get something out of it bigger than just the visit, right? So because Cormac and I have talked for years about how enriching this is to what you bring to projects when you can do things outside of the office and to round out your life, and that makes you a more valuable teammate on a project.
One thing, and I don't know in editing where y'all want to insert this, but it was nice seeing a lot of the Frank Lloyd Wright projects because you could see the progression of one person's career. Seeing his house, you could see the kernels of ideas that made it into other buildings, where you could see him testing little things here and there.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll try this here at my house where I'm my client. But then, for instance, a dumb example is the piano that sits halfway in the wall and above the stairs. And then you see him try to do that again in Wingspread, where he inserts the dining room table in between the two, in between the kitchen and the serving area. And that's just a very direct example, but there were lots of little kernels of ideas in that house that you go to another building and you look at it and you're like, oh, that's where and so I feel like one's career can be that, right? Where you're always striving. It's just sort of like America, right? Where you're always striving for a more perfect union, right? You're always striving for a better solution, and every project is going to have a lesson that you're going to learn that hopefully allows you to get better on the next one, which eventually hopefully leads to a few masterpieces, or at least just one.
Yeah.
Well, guys, it's been fun. I appreciate it. I know there were a lot of projects you didn't talk about, so maybe we can do a part 2 sometime.
Absolutely.
But I enjoyed this.
And we still need to figure out that whole Star Wars scroll at the beginning.
Okay.
Evan, it's good meeting you, and thanks for having me.